And welcome, welcome. Thank you for joining us. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah.
Amen.
Amen.
Coming right up with the text.
Hi, David.
Yes, good
Good
to
morning.
have us. Glad you're joining us, David. Thank you. Okay, so we are moving along with Parshat Ekev, as you can see, because this is Shishi, which means it's the sixth portion, and there's seven in total. So this he is telling them, remember, Moses is telling them that when they get to the land of Israel, that they need to remember God, to remember to perform the commandments, and in fact, this will benefit them, lema'an tarichu yamim ala adama, so that you may remain long upon the land. So it's so wonderful when it's talking about in a sense, the title deed to a land has to do with the righteousness with which the government and the people operate on that land. And I think it's such a powerful message, and one which I honestly wish we could take to heart. But and there are many people, of course, who do take it to heart, fortunately. Going on, he's now going to extol the virtues of the land of Israel. Ki haaretz asher ata vashama l'rishta, for the land which you are entering in order to possess. Lo ke'eretz Mitzrayim he, is not like the land of Egypt, asher yatzatem misham, from which you left. Now, just that, comparisons, it could be comparison for the worse. It's not as good as Egypt, right? It just says it's not like it. So Rashi's got this long comment, based on the rabbinic sources, which say, no, that's not what it means. It means it's so much better. So he has this very interesting comment, which we're going to get to in a moment. Asher tizra et zaracha, right? Which you sowed your seed, v'hishkita baraglecha, and you watered with your legs, kagan hayarek, like a vegetable garden. So Rashi, here we go. Lo ke'eretz Mitzrayim he. It's not like the land of Egypt. Ela tova hemena, but it's better than Egypt. V'ne'emara havtacha zo Yisrael. And this promise was made to the Israelites, b'yitziatam mimitzrayim, when they left Egypt, when they went out of Egypt. Shahayu omrim, and here's that word omer, which I believe doesn't mean necessarily saying, although it could, but the fact is the issue is more that they were thinking this, right? Shema lo navo el eretz tova v'yafa kazo. Possibly we won't come to a land that's as good and beautiful as this one, meaning as Egypt. Because remember, Egypt was a cradle of civilization because of the Nile and the fact that they had a steady supply of water, right? So the comment on the Sifrei, right? This is the Midrash, the halachic Midrash on the books of Numbers and Deuteronomy. Yacho biknuta hakatuv medaber. This is typical style of these kinds of midrashim, these halachic midrashim, and that is, of course, the argument. This is an argument, reductio ad absurdum, where you posit the opposite, and you show that possibility leads to a contradiction or is impossible. So when you have a choice of two things, one way to go about proving it is to take one side of it, show that it's impossible, so therefore the other side has to be true. So that's the way this argument is going to go. It's possible that this comparison is to show how awful the land of Israel is, that Scripture is actually saying that's what it's saying. V'kach amar lahem, and this is how he said to them, right? Lo ke'eretz Mitzrayim he, right? That what he was saying is, it's not like the land of Egypt, ela ra'ahemenu, but it's worse than the land of Egypt. Talmud lomar, and for this reason, Scripture says in Book of Numbers, chapter 13, V'chevron sheva shanim banta. Nivnata, excuse me. And Hebron was built 7 years. The verse goes on to say before Tsoan of Egypt, right? So there are these two cities that are being compared to one another. Hebron, of course, is in the land of Canaan or the land of Israel, and Tsoan is in the land of Egypt. So now we have a basis of comparison, etc. And now we go into this interpretation. What's the point of that statement, right? Hebron was built 7 years before Tsoan in Egypt. Adam Echad Bena'an. Each city was built by an individual, right? V'cham banat Tsoan. Ham built Tsoan, Mitzrayim, for his son Mitzrayim, Mitzrayim Beno. V'Chevron Lechnaan. And Hebron built Hebron for Canaan, right? Or let's see if I'm saying that right. Yeah. Yes, that has to be right. Hebron built it for his son Canaan. Derech Eretz. So now we're analyzing it. In the normal course of events, Adam boneh et hana'eh, the person builds the finest to begin with, v'achar kach boneh et ha'cheur, and afterwards he builds the ugly. Sfarim acherim, the other manuscripts that substitute the word hagarua, which means the inferior, for the word ugly. In other words, you first build the best, and then you build the inferior. Why? Shepsulato shel rishon, because you use what is discarded from the first. Hunoten b'sheni. He uses it to build the second one. Uvechol makom, right? And in every place, hachaviv kodim. The one you prefer is the one you start with, right? When you really want to do something and you're excited and want to do it, that's the one you do first. You don't put it off, right? So likewise, Hebron was built before Tzoan. Halamadatas. So this you can conclude. Shechevron Yafeh Mitzoan. Right? That Hebron is more beautiful than Tzoan. Umitzrayim meshubachat mikol ha'aratzot. Now let's go on to the land of Egypt. He says the land of Egypt is more praiseworthy than all the other lands. How do we know this? Shneimar, because it says back in Genesis chapter 13, Kagan Hashem. This is referring to the valley of Sodom and Gomorrah, etc., those cities before they were struck. That Lot looked out and saw that area was like a garden of God, the garden of the Lord, Ke'eretz Mitzrayim. And it goes on to say, like the land of Egypt. So in other words, they're saying that the land of Egypt is like the garden of the Lord. But so on, right? Shevach Mitzrayim he, and so on. So you've got Egypt, that's the most beautiful of the lands, and you've got so on that is considered the best place in Egypt. Why? How do we know that it was the best place? Shahaita Makom Malchut, because that's where the sovereigns lived. They lived there in that place. Shekain Hu Amar. How do we know this? Because it says in Isaiah chapter 30, Ki hayu betzoan sarav, that in Soan mentioned Soan, were his princes in Isaiah. So from this, we know that Soan was the most beautiful location in Egypt, and we know that Egypt was considered one of the most beautiful land. The Hebron, and on the other hand, Hebron, psulata shel Eretz Israel. It's considered the most inferior place in the land of Israel. How do we know this? Lacha hiktsua lekvurat meitim. That's why it was set aside as a cemetery. Was put in as the cemetery. And nevertheless, he yafa mitzon. The Hebron is considered to be more beautiful than Soan. So look at this comparison that we are making right now with Hebron and Soan. Uvik Tuvot, and in the tractate Ketuvot on page 112, Darshu Biyan Acher, they interpreted it in a different kind of way. and this is how they interpreted it. If Shar Adam Boneh Bayit Livno Hakatan, is it possible that a person builds a house for his youngest son, V'achar kach livno hagadol, and then afterwards he builds a house for his oldest son? Ela shemevuna alachat mishiv'a betzoan. But the idea is that Hebron was built up uh, 7 times better than so on. So we'd have to dig a little bit and see what's going on, and probably go back into Genesis and look at the genealogy there and see, because how Ham and his progeny, Mitzrayim being one of them, and where this is. And I think he had a number of children. And I'm going to go out on a line and say possibly they're saying that the Torah here is not to be taken literally, but rather to be understood that, let's put it this way: if Ham was if Mitzrayim was the firstborn of Ham, and Canaan was the seventh born of Ham, then understanding that's what it's trying, that the Torah is actually speaking metaphorically. I'm going out on a line. I would have to do some research, and I'd have to double check if in fact that's the way this proof is going. Okay, going on a little more. Asher yatzatem misham, from which you left, right? From where you departed. Afilu Eretz Ramses, even the land of Ramses, Asher yeshavtem ba, which you inhabited, right? Vehi b'meitav Eretz Mitzrayim, and that's considered, right? The area of Ramses is considered one of the best places in the land of Egypt. Shinemar, as it says, Genesis chapter 47. This is when the brothers come to Egypt, and Joseph makes himself known to them, and they decide to come down, right? Because there's a famine going on, and Joseph arranges to have them settle in the land of Ramses because they have flocks and there's pasturage there, and it's considered one of the best locations in Egypt. B'meitav haaretz, etc. It says, Genesis 47, it says, in the best part of the land, etc. Afhi eina ke'eretz
I,
Israel.
I had a question.
Yes.
Sorry.
No, it's
So
okay.
yeah, so before we look, okay, so instead of the contradictory or absurdist argument with a contradiction in order to prove it,
Yes.
why isn't the simple, or maybe I missed it, but why isn't the simple way of explaining it, the Jews were free, right? So no matter what, the land is going to be better than
Uh,
Egypt. I mean, it doesn't matter what the physical characteristics are, right? You have your freedom, it's yours, versus Egypt. It can be the most beautiful place in the world, but you're a slave there. So why isn't that the argument? And we just close the books,
I'm
or what
so,
am I
so
missing?
I'm so glad you asked that question. People are going to think you're my shill. You know that. Okay.
No, well,
So
yeah, but I am your shill, right? You have done this like multiple times, right? So
I love it.
anyway, go ahead.
Thank you. Okay. Number one, people have very short memories. And we see in the Torah itself how when they encounter difficulties, what do they say to Moses? We had it better in Egypt.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
mean, that is human nature. Human nature tends to forget the negative sides of the experience when you're facing a new bit of adversity. Okay, so that's one answer, and so yeah, I mean it. The other thing I like to think is that since I read about this relatively recently, is that there are two parts of the brain that influence us. There's the amygdala, which is sometimes referred to as the reptile brain, which deals with the fight or flight elements within us, right?
right.
The This heavily, deeply emotional part of our brains that has a tremendous influence on us, okay, as opposed to the cerebral cortex, which is our ability to reason and think through things and work it out, right? So there's this conflict, there's this constant battle between the amygdala and the cerebral cortex. And sad to say, guess which side wins so often, right? I mean, is the amygdala.
Of
And
course.
and yeah, exactly. So what do you think? So Moses is trying to reassure them, don't worry, folks. It's going to be so much better. And he's going to explain why, by the way. We may get to it today. We'll see as to why, in what way. Just saying it's better is one thing, but that's a generality. But he goes on to say how, okay, how it's so much better. And it's going to be interesting how he's going to describe it. Okay? We're going to go on.
All right.
It's in part of this thing. But thank you for asking, David, because you brought out a really good point. Okay? So,
Okay. Thanks.
yes. Oh, it's such a shame. You experience life long enough and you remember how short our memories are for the good stuff. Especially if we're facing new adversities, elements of adversity. All right. Okay, so right. So we're saying, we're talking about Ramses here and how it was the best place. Meitav haaretz afhi enak Eretz Israel. Even Ramses isn't as nice as the land of Israel. So he goes on to say, because back in Egypt, the hishkita beraglecha, right? You had to water it with your legs. What do we mean? Eretz Mitzrayim haitzat tzricha lahavi mayim menilus beraglecha. Back in the land of Egypt, you had to bring water from the Nile with your legs. Okay, we know about the flooding of the Nile, but the flooding of the Nile is what brings the silt and these important elements to the earth in around Egypt, which makes it a fantastic place to raise crops. But the flooding of the Nile only took place, I think, in the springtime, and other than that, they were going to have to figure out how to actually water, right? To actually water their crops, and that's what they had to do back then. They had to, and he'll say, "V'tzarich ata lenaded mishnatecha," and you'd have to. Basically, it means to get up very early. You'd have to disturb your sleep, v'la'amol, and to labor to bring it. V'hanamuch, so not only that, right? We're talking about Egypt here. Hanamuch shoteh, right? V'lo hagavoha. So what we're talking about is that when you pour water, of course, the water tends to go to the lowest point and not the highest point. Also, Egypt, remember, is essentially not mountainous. It is a flat area. Va'ata ma'aleh hamayim min hanamuch. And so you'd have to, I guess, well, that's not necessarily what he's saying, okay? But if there were, what he is saying, forgive me as I'm thinking this through more, is that if there were areas that were higher, that were elevated, atama aleha maich min hanamuch, right? Where's the river? The river's on the lowest level. So you'd have to bring up the water from that low area, lagavoha, to those elevated areas. Aval zo the matar hashamayim tishteh. But the land of Israel gets its water from rain, from the rain from the heavens. Okay. Okay, lematar hashamayim tishtemaim. It drinks water from the rain of heaven. Ataya Yashen, you shlof away, you sleep away al mitatcha, on your bed. V'hakadosh baruch hu mashke. And who does the watering? Guess who? Right? God. God waters it. Namuch v'gavoa, both the low and the high, because the rain is coming down from the heavens. So there's an important element of why Israel is better than Egypt, right? Galui v'sheino galui, that which is exposed, that which isn't exposed, kachat, all the same, doesn't make any difference. And then going on to say kagan hayerek, like a vegetable garden, she'ein dai lo b'keshamim, right? Which is not sufficient with rainfall, umashkin oto beregel uvakatef, and so you have to wash. This is back in Egypt, right? Or at least a vegetable garden. Period, perhaps is what he's saying, and you have to water it with your legs and your shoulders. In other words, you have to schlep water because rain is not sufficient. But definitely, let's take a look back at this word, right? Right. Here we are. Right. Ishkita Kagane. Right. That's referring to Egypt, though. Right. Yeah. So he's saying, that's why we're talking about this being, on your feet, that they had to get up early to actually water that. Okay, let's see if we have any. Yeah, next verse. Let's do it. Okay. But the land which you are crossing over to inherit, Eretz Harim Uvakaot. It's a land of mountains and valleys. I'm still going to land up with the fact that Egypt, I'm assuming, is much more of a plain and isn't so mountainous. The matar hashamayim tishtemayim. It drinks water from the rain of heavens. Let's take a look at Rashi. Eretz Harim Uvakaot, right? It's a land of mountains and valleys. Meshubach Hahar. What's the point here? The mountain is much better, right? Min Hamishor, from the plain. In what sense? The level area. Shehameshor beveit kor, because as far as a flat area, a beit core, that is an area requiring a core of seed, and a core is about a little more than 1.5 kilograms, right? That's how they figure a core, right, of seed, and it's how much the area that requires so much seed, a tazorea core. So on a flat area, right, a core area, you plant a core of seed. Aval hahar, but with regards to a mountain, right, or a higher level like that, Bevet Kor, so if you're talking about a mountain or a plateau that is a Beit Kor in area, the top of this area, Mimenu Chamisha Korim, the Chameshet Korim, you actually have an area of 5 cores to plant. Arba me arba'a shipu'av. You've got 4. It's sort of, if you can visualize this plateau, that's a square plateau essentially. So you've got 5 sides that are leading up to the plateau. So shu'av are its slopes, ve'echad berosho, and one at the top of it. So uvakaot, and so we're talking bikot, valleys, hein hamishor. That would be referring to the plain level areas. One more. Eretz Asher Hashem Elokecha Doreshota, a land which the Lord your God seeks after it. In other words, Doreshota means he investigates it, he pays attention to it. Like Midrash, right? Is like seeking out in the text, exploring the text. Tamid Einei Hashem Elokecha Ba, the eyes of the Lord your God are always upon it. Mereshit Hashanah, from the beginning of the year, Va'acharit Hashanah, and to the end of the year. Okay. So what do we mean? Asher Hashem Elokecha Doreshota. He's saying that this, when it comes to the land of Israel, God is paying attention to it in a way, seeks after it. But Allah kol haratzot doresh. Wait a second. Doesn't he look after all the lands? Doesn't he seek after all the lands? Shinemar, it states in the book of Job, chapter 38, Lahamtir al eretz loish, to send rain upon basically no man's land, meaning, I believe here, every single place, even places that are uninhabited, right? So he sends rain. Ela kivyachol. But what is that really meaning? It's as if it's trying to say, Eino doresh ela ota, that God only seeks after the land of Israel, but al yedei ota drisha, and by means of that seeking out, shedorsha, that he seeks it, doresh et kol ha'aratzot ima, he then includes all the other lands with it. It is interesting how the way, just in terms of the news, how Israel, in a way, fills a lot of the news. And when you consider the size of Israel, not only in terms of its geographic area, but its population as well, compared to other places in the world, it is interesting. Maybe that's only in the United States. Maybe it's only in Western countries. I don't know. But it is interesting just by way of comparison. Tamid Einei Hashem Elokecha Ba, the eyes of the Lord your God are constantly upon her. Lirot ma hitzricha, what's he looking for? To see what it requires. What does it need? L'chadesh bo gzerut itim l'tova v'itim l'ra'ah. And in order to issue edicts, times of goodness and times of badness, etc., good times and bad times, v'chule, etc., kedeita b'Rosh Hashanah Yud Zayin, as is mentioned in the tractate Rosh Hashanah, page 17. Mereshit Hashanah, from the beginning of the year. Me Rosh Hashanah nidon ma yehe b'sofa. In other words, at Rosh Hashanah, right, at the festival of Rosh Hashanah, it is judged, the judgment is made regarding what will ensue to the end of the year. So we have here the basis of our tradition that the days of judgment of Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur occur, and in which the rest of the year is determined based on our behavior up to that point, and also whether or not we choose to turn our hearts and do tshuva and look at what we're doing and see about making necessary changes in our lives. And I will stop the share here. So really some beautiful, beautiful passages, the significant areas of Deuteronomy, and I'm so happy to share them with you, and I really hope you enjoyed it. Thank you.
Yeah. I figure that the Egypt's land is flat, so they have to water it. But Israel, when it rains, it comes down from the mountains
Right.
and it soaks the ground, and they don't have to water it.
That's what he's saying. That's what he's telling them. Yes, yes, indeed. Right. So
Yeah.
it's great. Thanks, Mitchell. Good to see you too.
Good to see you, Rabbi. But I don't see the shot of the core. I thought I did, but I guess I don't. I don't. I don't understand the. I guess I came in at the core is.
Oh,
You said
a core
you
is
said
okay. A core is a weight of seed, right? It's amount.
oh,
It's
wait.
yeah. It's a measurement of seed.
One and
Okay.
a half milligram. One and a half
Right.
milligram.
Right. So many, like it's saying a pound of seed. How much of an area would a pound of seed sow? How much ground will a pound of seed sow? Okay. That's how they distinguish the measurements. Okay. Determine the
So
measurement.
a core is a pound. Core is a pound of seed.
Well, it's about 1.5 kilograms is what they figure.
1.5 kilograms.
Yeah. Right. Yes. Um, Let me see. I think I had you can look up online, look up biblical measurements, and you will see
Oh, that.
you'll see both area and liquid measures and
I should know. I should know.
volume, and you'll see the various ways in which this was divided. Okay, I'm going to
Yeah,
stop the recording.